So these are my Fatshark HDOs, which are the king of FPV goggles. And mine's got some of the newbie drawn foam on it, which is the comfiest foam. And I use mine with an Achilles module, and this one is the one by Furious FPV. It's a decent module, nothing fancy. It's got a few nice features, particularly like the homing beacon, but we're not really here to discuss modules, we're here to discuss goggles. Now these goggles have an absolutely cracking screen because of the amazing high-res display, and there's no sort of getting away from that. If you're looking for FPV goggles, these have the best display you're going to find. And to get the most out of that display, you need to be using a CMOS camera, a Foxeer Predator V3 or a Runcam Eagle or a Falcor, and ideally you want to be using PAL because you'll get a deeper field of view when you're looking at it. If you look at it in NTSC, you'll notice that you get a little bit of cropping at the bottom of the screen, and if you switch to PAL you'll gain the extra lines that PAL has, and it makes quite a big difference to the actual feed you get, particularly on the Runcam Micro Eagle. Now I've enjoyed using these goggles, and I can't get away from the fact that, you know, the view from them is very good. The size of the display, the 37 degrees, is pretty much perfect. But I've got a number of bugbears with mine, and speaking to a few other people, I'm not the only person who has this, but it's probably dependent on the distance between your eyes, the IPD and all the rest of it. But every time I put these on, I basically have to adjust the IPD every single time. If I put them on the top of my head and look at my quad for a second and pull them back down again, I'm going to have to adjust the IPD. And the reason for that is they're constantly out of focus unless I fiddle or move the goggles around on my head. And there seems to be only a very tiny place where basically the majority of the lens is in focus. And that place varies between all the way out and in. And that might be sort of increased by the fact that this newbie drawn foam is thicker, but it's also sort of comfier. My other bugbear with these goggles, in fact all Fatshark goggles, is that the fan is frankly crap. Perhaps it's because quite often in my goggles I put, well, not diopters, but cut down old glasses. I basically cut them to the size of diopters. You'll see them on my other goggles in a minute. Perhaps that sort of makes the fan, makes it harder for the fan to do its work. But again, the fan is next to useless. When I'm using these goggles, I tend to sort of have to put them on my face or put them on my head a good 10 minutes before I fly. So I know that when I'm going to be flying, I'm not going to get fogged lenses. Other than that, it's really just about the lenses with these. You know, the DVR works fine. I have it on auto. This particular module it does bring up an on-screen display within the goggles, but it's just as easy to press the button as it is to try and find these little tiny buttons on top of the goggles. The only thing I do particularly like is it's really easy to change your brightness and contrast on the fly via this little joystick. But there isn't really anything else to talk about. It's all about the view. And in fairness, that's as it should be. Obviously, many people have criticised the lack of a power button. It doesn't really bother me. I mean, pull out a barrel connector or press a button. It's kind of one of the same. God knows why we still have a separate connector for the fan. God knows why it's still on a timer and you can't just switch it on and off. These are things that only Fatshark know. So, I bought myself some Skyzone 03s. And before I had my HDOs, I had some Skyzone 02S V Plus, I think. the goggles that, the newer version of the goggles that Lidrib flew with until recently. And I really liked those goggles. They had tons of features, the on-screen display, and I ran mine with a Fatshark faceplate, so I could still have a fan, albeit the fan, as I've said, does very little. But I was missing a lot of the sort of features when I transferred to these guys that I really liked on the Skyzones. The spectrum analyzer, the fact that, you know, I had sort of proper buttons to press, sort of lots of features. So because these guys, the Skyzone R3s have been updated quite a bit, I sort of was really tempted, and when I saw them on offer, I thought, you know what, I'm going to grab myself a pair of these and see how I get on. And if you put them side to side, obviously I've chosen mine in red. That's a personal choice. I've always found the Fatshark HDOs to feel really plasticky and sort of creaky. They don't feel like a quality goggle. You don't feel like you've got your 400 odd quid's worth of money. It feels like it's been made really, really cheaply, albeit we know that the screens inside are exceptionally good. The Skyzone, by comparison, feels and looks far more expensive. The plastic feels nicer, the fan cover is metal and feels much sturdier, the buttons all have a satisfying click, and of course, it being a Skyzone, it's got built-in diversity modules, so we don't have to faff around using external modules. I'm going to sort of tell you side by side the sort of things that the Skyzone absolutely whips the HDOs on, and then we'll talk about the HDO and its trump card. Skyzone build quality, in my opinion, is really, really good. I ran my Sky R2s for 12 months or so without a single issue. The screens in them were really good, albeit very small compared to the HDOs. And this guy is very similar in terms of the way it works to that old Skyzone that I liked so much. So we've got these satisfying buttons, everything's sort of built in. You've got a nice on-screen display that lets you do everything that you need to do. You've got a fancy LED which runs across the front, which you can change colours on and make it do whatever you want to do. The fan on it is like a hurricane, and it has 2 or 3 different settings, and I basically leave mine on high, and when I turn the goggles on, it basically blasts cold air against the lenses and my face and clears the goggles in literally a second. And then you just press this side button, which is also the power button, twice to turn it off. Job done, and I can happily fly. On a hot day, it's also lovely because it blows, you can feel the air blowing against your face, and it really cools you down. In terms of comfort, I get quite a bit of light leakage on my HDOs, usually around sort of this area. On the Skyzones, the original reviews all hated the faceplate, but if you look, the newer models have this additional bit that you can stick on, which sort of increases the curvature. And again, I'm using the same Nubidron foam, and with the Nubidron foam on, they're as comfortable as these, so that issue is immediately wiped out. In terms of features, I much prefer having an on-screen display, and the fact that I can see everything without messing around waiting for this thing to boot up, etc. So, you know, if I want to check my channel, I can press this button. It brings up a nice spectrum analyzer which shows me all the available channels and how busy they are. I can easily flip through them. You know, with this guy, the goggle turns on, and then this turns on, and it goes off, and it turns on again, and then it decides what channel you're on. And that's the same with the majority of external modules. This guy just sort of does everything without any faff. You know, if you want to change your band, you can just quickly flip through. the one sort of quirk of it is, because I'm really used to it, I don't find it hard at all. But if you bought these out of the box, you'd probably find the way that these buttons work sort of counterintuitive. So this one's labelled camera, and if you press it once, this goggle has a camera, so you can use it to look around. Don't use it particularly often, but as a glasses wearer, it's sometimes handy if I'm perfectly set up, ready to fly, and then I arm and my quad makes an unusual noise, so I just quickly press the camera button and I can see what my quad is doing. Quickly press it again and you go back to your FPV feed. Hold this camera button down and you'll go into the band selection, and again the spectrum analyzer. And it's kind of the same everywhere. When you're in the menu, you'll long press this to go into the menu. You use these buttons to go up and down, but then you have to sort of come over here to select, and it all gets a little bit confusing. But again, you learn from it. Now, this guy's got a 42 degree field of view, so it is bigger than the HDOs. And unlike the HDOs, I don't have to keep fiddling with the IPD every time I put them on my head. However, again, probably because of the thickness of this new foam, I do get around the edges a little bit of blurring. But if I squash them against my head, that goes away. So I could probably just trim this foam down a little bit to solve that issue. Now, in terms of DVR, the Fatshark, in fact, the majority of goggles have awful DVR, and Fatshark released an update for theirs which solved some of the sort of jagged flickering lines you can see across this image here. Whether this is running the newer version or not, I couldn't tell you, to be honest with you. I don't really care one way or the other, because the DVR in a Fatshark, whether it's got the crackly lines across it or not, is frankly rubbish, and you'd only really use it in rare circumstances. By comparison, the Skyzone DVR is frankly incredible in comparison to the HDOs. It's using H.264, and you can immediately see the difference. The DVR on the HDOs doesn't show anything like the quality of feed that you're looking at. The Skyzone, I would probably say that the DVR actually looks better than the feed. And that's where things go a little bit south for the Skyzone. On the Sky R2s, I said that I felt that the screens were actually better than the HDRs. They're a lot crisper, a lot brighter colours. But when you take those similar sort of resolution screens, and I'll post all the nitty gritty on the side of this video at some point, but when you take those lower resolution screens and increase the field of view to 42 degrees, you begin to see the difference in quality. And whereas with the HDOs, if you get a really good camera like the Eagle or the Falcor, etc., the HDOs begin to shine. With the Skyzones, they don't. They begin to look worse. Whereas if you run the Skyzones with an old Runcam Swift or something like that, they're much, almost, I wouldn't say better, but you notice less issues, less pixelization, less jagged edges, etc. So the long and the short of it is the HDOs whip the Skyzone in certain circumstances, but those circumstances aren't all the time. So if you're flying in a wide open space and you're flying over fields and stuff like that, the differences between the HDOs with its super high res screens and the Skyzones are pretty minimal. You won't really notice the difference. But I specifically took mine to this really tree spot where you've basically got multiple versions of the same colour: light green, dark green, mid green, shadowy green, bright green, and it really exposed the downsides of the Skyzone. I was sort of getting halo effects around trees, glaring whites and jet black blacks, but really sort of artificial, as if I'd clunked, as if I was running crazy contrast on my cameras. And I fiddled around with the settings in the Skyzone and improved it, but it never really went away. Whereas in that setting, putting on the HDRs felt like going from, you know, an old Commodore 64 computer game to, you know, something that you play on your PlayStation 4, etc. So there's a huge difference, but only in certain circumstances. So given all that, the odd thing is that when I've been flying this week, instead of picking up the HDOs, I've picked up the Skyzones. And for the reason for that is I find them easier to live with. With the HDOs, you end up using, you know, a Fatshark battery case, or possibly one of the fewest FPV cables with a regulator. Basically, you got to faff around because you need a 2 or a 3S LiPo or battery, and then you need something with 5 volt to access your fan. With the Skyzones, they'll take 2 to 6S direct power, and because the fan doesn't have its own power supply or power input, you don't have to faff around. So you literally need one cable with a plug on the end of it and an XT60 on the other end, and you can use all of your old crappy saggy batteries that you no longer use in the field for flying to power your goggles. And because I've got so many old batteries, if I head to the field, instead of worrying that have I charged my 18650s to the, you know, enough, am I going to last a whole day, are my goggles full, I never really have to worry about it because I've always got ample batteries. The other thing is, because I don't have to sort of faff around adjusting the IPD every 2 seconds, I just sort of bung these on my head and I'm good to go. So I've kind of, in my head, I've kind of almost got a goggle for 2 sets of circumstances. If I'm heading to do some serious flying in a really sort of difficult environment that has lots of shadows and lots of contrasting colours and lots of similar colours, I would choose the HDOs, you know, night and day, just because of the screens. But for every other situation, the Sky 03s are so much easier to live with that I just, being relatively lazy, I just pick them up by default. And unless you're sort of looking at them side by side as I did, you're never really going to reach a point where you think, oh, these goggles are rubbish, I need to upgrade to some HDOs. And that's the thing with these goggles. When we get in Norfolk FPV, a group I sometimes fly with, you get a lot of people saying, oh, I'm looking for some goggles, what should I get? And you get the usual people saying, oh, get some HDOs, they're great. And then some other people saying, you know, get some cheap Earsheen goggles to start off with until you decide you like it. And invariably what they do is they meet up with the lads and they go and try a load of different goggles on and then come back and say, oh, I need to get some HDOs. So if you're looking at goggles and you don't want to spend a fortune, just discount these bloody goggles. And once you've taken those away, you're left with a pair of goggles that you'd be really happy with. And this applies not just to the Skyzone, but to the Armways and all those things. I could happily fly with these until my dying breath. And it's only when you put these on in really tricky, difficult flying circumstances that you notice and you appreciate the difference. And that's really what it comes down to. In terms of price, I paid 310 quid for this. And in fairness, and I do apologise, Banggood gave me a discount code, but it's actually run out because I've been a bit slow getting this review done for various reasons, so I apologise. So Banggood, I got these for 310 quid. I think the HDOs on Banggood are 400 quid. I paid 65 quid, is it? 60 quid or so for the module. And in terms of performance, having flown them back to back, the differences are minimal. The Skyzone possibly has marginally worse reception than this Achilles module. And don't forget that this Achilles module in Bardwell's testing was the only one that actually put up the smallest fight against the mighty Rapid Fire. So you're looking at 400 quid for your goggles, you're looking at 60 to 130 quid for your module, whereas I paid 310 quid for this with built-in modules. If you buy this from Banggood, it will come with an 18650 case and you'll have to spend another tenner on batteries to put in it. If you buy it from the UK, it will come with the usual 18 milliamp hour LiPo battery, which you can charge via USB. This guy doesn't come with a battery, but it does come with a lot of cables, which this guy doesn't. And it also comes with a really long, nicely made cable, which has a barrel connector on one end and a LiPo connector on the other end. So you don't really have to buy a battery, because the majority of people already have a load lying around. So I think that's what it comes down to. In terms of which is better, the Skyzone absolutely mullers the HDRs in every single department by one, and that is the screens. If I was a newcomer to this hobby and I hadn't been flying 3 years or so in more and more difficult spots, I'd probably recommend that nobody buys the HDRs, because they're so expensive. Actually, I'll take that back. Unless you've got a lot of money, I wouldn't buy the HDRs. If you're like a normal guy and getting out in this hobby is pretty expensive and you don't have money to burn, or you'd rather spend that money on more quads, I would ditch the HDOs and I would look at the Skyzones. And the Skyzone R2, actually, Skyzone, I don't know why, everybody loves Fatshark. In fact, I'll come on to why they do. The Sky R2S V+, which is the goggle that I had prior to these guys, absolutely spanks the Fatshark Dominator V3, and it's better than the Armway Commander V1 and any other goggle. And its downside was always that it didn't have a fan, but as I said, it's dead easy to fit a Fatshark faceplate and fan. I think where Fatshark comes into its own is its after sales cover, which, if you follow my channel, you know that these were sent off for repair, but it actually turned out that had 3 faulty batteries. And although it took Fatshark over a week to get back to me, which sort of annoyed me if I'm honest, once it actually got back to me, the UK repairer contacted me immediately. I posted the goggles off to them at the weekend. They arrived with the repairer on the Monday, and they were sent back to me on the Tuesday by registered post with tracking. You can't really argue with that. So, if you're buying some of these, you're not just buying a pair of goggles that may go wrong. You're buying yourself probably a couple of years peace of mind, knowing that hopefully, providing it's not your fault, Fatshark have got your back. With the Skyzones, who knows? When I mentioned these on a previous video, somebody said that Skyzone had been really helpful, and they'd had contact with them straight away, and I think with Skyzone what they do is they ask you to post the goggles back to them for them to repair. But in this particular case, the guy knew what was wrong with them, so Skyzone sent out that particular part. Now that's all well and good, but if you've got to send your goggles back to China, A, it's probably going to cost you 10 or 20 quid in postage, but B, you're probably looking at potentially 2, 3, 4 weeks before they've got to them and they've looked at them, and however long it takes for them to get you back. I couldn't manage a week without a set of goggles. So that's a sort of big if. Are they going to go wrong? If they do go wrong, can you repair them? It's a different matter. So yeah, that kind of applies to everybody bar the Fatshark, and that's why everybody likes the Fatshark so much. The downside, of course, is the huge price tag. So to end this waffly video, this is my summary to help anybody who's looking at this. Don't buy the Fatshark Dominator V3s. They're overpriced and crap. Buy instead, if you can get them at a decent price for a couple of £100, the Skyzone R2, which are a 16:9 goggle, which not everybody likes, but with a small screen size like the Dominator V3 and the Armway V1 and the Skyzones have, I find 16.9 to be less looking like you're looking at a postage stamp. If you're looking at the next jump up at goggles, I think Fatshark have discontinued the HD3s, and you're probably not going to be able to get them for very much longer. But given they tend to be a similar price or not a huge amount different than the HDOs, I think you'd be mad not to just go straight to the HDOs and pay the extra bucks. And that kind of leaves the Skyzones somewhere in the middle. You know, for around 300, 310, whatever they are now, 340, you get a really full-featured goggle with a really good display, if you haven't tried the HDOs. So there you go. Am I glad I bought them? I'm not disappointed, and I really like them, and as I said, I'm using them a lot. I'm disappointed at the difference between the HDO screens and the Skyzones in certain circumstances. I was imagining that the difference would be a lot smaller than it is, and when I'm pushing myself and I'm flying those proximity spots, it makes it easier. If you look at the DVR footage, when I do those punch outs and then flip over and look down at green and green and green and green and green, it was much easier to spot a path down with the HDOs than it was with the Skyzones. So, like all things, it comes down to money. If you've got tons of money, get this. If you haven't got tons of money and you're impatient and you don't want to save up tons of money, I think it's a really good goggle. And all the criticisms that they made when it first came out about the faceplate, etc., are, in my opinion, non-existent. And if they are there, they're solved by having this extra bit that they've added, and, you know, some £8 foam from Newbie Drone. In terms of light leakage, the only place I get light leakage on these is just here, and that's because I have a very flat Neanderthal forehead. But strangely, because the goggles are red, that light leakage isn't so much of a problem. It doesn't bother you so much because it's not piercing. It's more sort of soft, diffuse light. Whereas if you get these in white, you really notice it a lot more. Although, to be honest with you, light leakage isn't really something that bothers me too much. You only really notice it when you're not flying, and the minute that I'm flying, I'm looking at the screen in front of me, not what's happening around the edges. So there you go. Hope that was useful to somebody. But yeah, can't really argue with the displays of the HDO. Cheers guys. Thanks. Bye bye.